Hello, everyone. This is Professor DePaulo. Welcome you back to Psych 265, Research in Psychology. And today I want to talk about how to write the introduction for your research manuscript, the rough draft of the introduction. So, as I said previously, you're going to be writing rough drafts of each section of the paper, and then I'm going to give you feedback, and then you're going to edit them and submit a final revised paper at the end of the semester. And probably one of the hardest parts of writing the rough draft, or the most time consuming parts of writing the manuscript, is writing the introduction, because it requires a lot of research and summarization of important relevant details from previous research that's been conducted. So I'm going to show you how to do that today. So I've made a guide for you. If you go into the assignments tab here on Blackboard, and it says writing the introduction of the APA manuscript, and this is where I'll put the video as well. And you'll be able to access that, and where you can actually submit the introduction assignment as a PDF file. So let's click on this and I'll walk you through how to write the introduction. So the introduction should be approximately 3 pages in length, double spaced, 1-inch margin, regular 12-point font. The first 2 paragraphs should be defining the problem. Well, this semester, what you're studying is attitudes or our attitudes towards COVID 19, both behaviors related to COVID 19, such as wearing a face mask, covering your face in public, social distancing. So these are very important topics, as you've realized over the last year. And some people are better at doing this or more willing to do this than others. Some people do not want any part of the face mask. They don't really practice social distancing. They're more likely to get infected or to infect other people. And so it's important to know why this is the case. So we're going to look at some psychological traits and see if we can link them to these kinds of behaviors like mask wearing and social distancing. The other issue is vaccination now. So why are certain people more willing to be vaccinated and other people are completely against vaccination? That could be for a variety of reasons, but we're going to look at some of the possible traits that could be linked to people failing to be vaccinated or people wanting to be vaccinated, and how that can sort of influence public policy or maybe persuade people to actually go out and get vaccinated. And look, I mean, vaccination is a personal choice. No one is required to be vaccinated, but most people believe that vaccination is for the greater good of the general public. So why are people hesitant about getting vaccinated or completely, totally against vaccination? They want no part of it, or they think the government is sort of pushing this, or they don't want the government to tell them what to do. There's a variety of reasons for this. So we're going to do some basic research, looking at correlations and some differences, mean differences with like t-test and ANOVA for these traits and linking them to COVID-related behaviors and vaccination. So those first 2 paragraphs, paragraphs 1 and 2, should define the problem. What are we studying? Well, we're studying traits related to COVID 19 behaviors, such as mask wearing, social distancing, and following rules, basically. And the other thing we're studying is vaccination. Why certain people want to get vaccinated and others don't. And why is this topic important? There's a ton of reasons why this is important. With the most obvious being that if people do not get vaccinated, then the economy and society in general will not return to normal because the spread of the virus and the variants of the virus, are dangerous. Whether you believe the virus is a cold, I've heard people say it's a cold, it's just like a flu, and you get it and you recover. And other people are taking it a lot more seriously than that. And depending on, I guess, how lucky you are, you either maybe it hasn't, touched you personally, or maybe unfortunately it's touched you greatly with many people you've known that have died or suffered severely from it. So everyone has a different perspective, and you respect people's perspectives and their opinions, but you want to know why certain people refuse and others want to get the vaccines. And this is the part of of an interest in a health psychologist or health researcher, and I'm in that mold. And so that's why I think this problem is important. I mean, there's a lot of reasons why the problem is important. What you want to do is go look up the research, though. Cite the research. Do not write I. I think the problem's important because it's personally affected me. No, maybe it has personally affected you. And it's affected me too. And I understand it's been a very difficult situation. And it might have been, a lot of trauma with the whole COVID thing. I mean, it's been a disaster. And it's not that I'm not interested in that. It's just that it's not appropriate for a research paper. For a research paper, you do not want to talk about your personal experiences, your anecdotes. That's not acceptable. So when you want to define why the problem is important, you do not want to use I or we or they or you, because all of that is like editorializing. It's all about, introducing your opinion or your belief or what you've seen, which may be important in other contexts, but it's not appropriate for a research manuscript. So get rid of all of that language. I, we, are, you, all of that stuff should not be in here. Should not be in the paper at all. So talk about why it's important from a societal perspective. Go look up some research. Now, how do you get research? Well, to get research, you want to first try Google Scholar. So you go into Google Scholar and you want to talk about COVID-19 consequences, something like that, right? And there's like a ton of these. Uh, the consequences of COVID-19 on mental health and implications for clinical practice. That might be interesting. Here's another one: COVID-19 pandemic and mental health consequences. Impact of nutrition, not nutrition. COVID-19 and the consequences for the elderly. I mean, there's a ton of stuff talking about the consequences of COVID-19. What you want to look for are PDFs here. PDF or HTML because these are articles and they're available for you. Not every single entry in Google Scholar is going to have that. But you want to find ones with PDFs or HTMLs and you want to read the article. So let's say I want to read mental health implications. So I click on the PDF and I wait for the Google Scholar to load it. Looks like I'm having a problem with that. No, it's not found. So it's not always available. If it's not found, find another one. Here's another one. The different forms of COVID-19, misinformation. So that's something that could be interesting to talk about because, there was a lot of confusion about COVID-19 and that created even a bigger problem in society. So you could read that. Maybe you want to talk a little bit about that. Here's how it's affecting research. Here's how it's affecting higher education. Uh, there's a ton of this stuff. You just want to find a couple articles talking about why, what is COVID-19, obviously, and why is it important. And that's been researched by everyone lately. Over the last year, everyone's writing about COVID-19 and the impact it's having. So you can find that. Now, if you don't want to use Google Scholar, you can also use PsycInfo. So if you go to the BMCC webpage and you go to the library, here's libraries up at the top, and you want to go to databases here. And if you want to go databases by subject, you can go to psychology, and you have either the DSM. Well, this is basically the list of different, mental illnesses organized in a big manual called the Diagnostic Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders. We don't really need that for research, but you might need that for learning about different disorders. Psych articles, psych info. So I use either psych articles or psych info for most of my research, besides Google Scholar, of course. So, and then you may have to log in if you're not redirected. and you need your login for uh, your email login, I believe it is. Let's try my email login. Oh, CUNY login credentials. So it may not be your email login. It might be CUNY first. So I'll change to CUNY first. So CUNY first login. So once you log in with CUNY first, you're into this EBSCO host here, and you could find in all this information. So if I just type in COVID-19 pandemic impact, there's probably thousands of articles. Actually, only 400. So it's a relatively small number. Social impacts, living with HIV. This is United Arab Emirates. This is the impact on psychiatric patients, patients with neurodegenerative diseases. So you have a whole bunch of things. There's so many different things here for COVID-19. Um, I mean, people have written all kinds of impact on students and teachers. You may not have that. If this is linked full text, that means that we have it in the library. If it doesn't, you can click on it and see if you can get it. And sometimes if you want to find it at CUNY and see if you can find it. You may not be able to. And it looks like, no, we don't have it. So interlibrary loan, it's not worth doing. So they don't have it, just move on to something else. Here's the impact of lockdown on mental and social health of children. That's really important. And there's an article we have. Click on linked full text. And you can read the abstract and read all about why you think it's important. It seems like the children's reported severe anxiety, sleep-related impairments, and poor global health. So that's a problem. Kids not going to school, they've been locked down for a year, they've been homeschooled, they can't go out, they can't see their friends. You know, what impact is it gonna have now, which is what this article is talking about, but also in the future on these children and adolescents. You know, is it gonna cause damage in the future? That's one huge impact of the pandemic that we haven't really been talking too much about. I mean, we've talked a little bit about it in terms of education, but mostly we're just trying to get the numbers down and trying to get vaccines out, and we'll clean up all the rest later on. But mental health impacts, impact on depression, impact on anxiety, impact on children, impact financially. I just heard about statistics talking about the impact on number of births. So the number of births in the US and other countries is way down during the past year, more so than normal. So it's like sort of superseding the downward trend that we've been seeing over the years, but it's like way down. And the reason is probably financial. People are worried about their jobs. People are worried about raising a family. They don't know if they can afford as many children. People are not dating as much because they've been on lockdown for the year. So there's been lots, I mean, a ridiculous number of impacts, and you could find all these different things about it. And in the first two paragraphs, you can knock that out very easily because there's lots to talk about. You don't have to talk about everything, but find a few articles and talk about them. Find things you think are interesting, and then you must cite them. So you must paraphrase and cite. So paraphrase. So when you want to paraphrase, you've got to put in parentheses, author, comma, year, like that. That's an APA citation. If you have 6 or more authors, you could just put the first author et al. So if you have 6 or more, you can do first author. You just need last name. You don't need first name. You don't need middle initial. That's all in the references. But for the citation, it's just the first author's last name. If you have 6 or more, et al, which means and others, year. So if you have less than 6, though, you have to list the author's last name. So if you have 5 authors, you've got to list the 5 authors' last name and then put the year. So that's how you cite. Paraphrase means put it in your own words. Do not use direct quotes. Do not copy and paste. You must put it in your own words. It's as basic as that. So let's go back to what we were looking at. Okay. So those are the first 2 paragraphs. Paragraphs 3 to 7 are the literature review. Now, this literature review should be based on the hypotheses that we're studying as a class. And so I've listed the hypotheses that you're studying, that we are studying. Empathy will be positively correlated with mask wearing. People receiving COVID-19 vaccine will be more empathic, that means higher empathy, than those not receiving the vaccine. Health anxiety will be positively correlated with a fear of future pandemics. So if you're worried about your health, you're going to be worried that something bad is going to happen in the future. People who have lost friends and family members will have higher levels of depression and generalized anxiety. That's pretty basic stuff. It depends on our sample size, really, of that. And attachment anxiety would be positively correlated with the desire for family and friends to be vaccinated. So if you have attachment anxiety, you're afraid of people abandoning you. You tend to be clingy. And if you're afraid of abandonment and you tend to be clingy, you're going to want your friends and family to be vaccinated because you don't want them to get sick and possibly have some negative outcome, right? So if you're really worried about being abandoned or you tend to be very clingy, this is very important that people get vaccinated, they're safe. Your family and friends are safe, and your partners, your romantic partners as well. So those are our 5 hypotheses, and you should find articles for this literature review section here, which is paragraphs 3 to 7. You should find articles that deal with these hypotheses. And then you're going to do 1 article per paragraph. So you're going to summarize each article in 1 paragraph, 1 large paragraph. For each paragraph, you're going to state the main hypotheses, briefly describe the design methodology of the study, and provide the results conclusions. Do not provide actual statistics, just give the results and conclusions and write them out. Don't give the numbers. And if there are any limitations of the study, you can briefly state this as well. So I want 1 large paragraph for each of the 5 studies that you're going to use here. And those studies could be about anything related to these hypotheses. So you're going to find a study on empathy and mask wearing. That's probably one you can do fairly easily. Let me go back here into PsycInfo. And let's see what there is on empathy and mask wearing. Right here, there's one that's been published November 2020. Empathy promotes physical distancing and wearing of face masks. I'm not sure if we have that one. Probably not. But the article does exist. Do not pay for any articles. We do not have this one. So that would have been a good one, but we don't have it. You might be able to find it through PsycInfo. There's not much here on empathy and mask wearing, but we can look in PsycInfo now. Effects of face masks on empathy. Here's the article that we were looking at before that they didn't have here, right? This one here by this author. I can't even pronounce their name. Stefan Vatscheicher. They have that in PsycInfo though. See, so you may not be able to get everything in I should say they have that in Google Scholar. You may not be able to get it in PsycInfo, but you can get it in Google Scholar. So they have it in Google Scholar right here. You click on the PDF. There's 1 article for you. It's a very relevant article here about mask wearing and social distancing and during the pandemic and empathy. That directly ties to our first hypothesis, so you can write a paragraph about this study. You don't have to use this article, but I'm showing you that there's plenty of articles out there. Now, if you want to look at a different hypothesis, let's go back. COVID vaccine and empathy. So then you would look for vaccine and empathy. There's articles here about vaccines and empathy. If you want to put COVID, you put COVID. Empathy, right here. Something about empathy. They're the same people. So these people are thinking the same way I'm thinking. they're just ahead of the game, right? They're thinking in the same sort of understanding of the process that I'm thinking right now. But you have plenty of other things here um, about empathy. So influence of empathy and risk perception during lockdown. This is vaccinations, or you could just write COVID vaccination. Uh, and you could put psychological traits and see what that comes up. So you have to play around with it a bit. Psychological characteristics of vaccine hesitancy and resistance. This is in Nature, so it's a top journal. And you have the whole article here. This is really interesting stuff. So this might be related to some of the things we're looking at. It depends, but this is something that's important that you can talk about because we're looking at why do certain people get the vaccine and why are other people very hesitant to get the vaccine. And you could read this article and read the abstract first and make sure it's something you want to look at. But they're looking at altruism here. They're looking at paranoia, religious beliefs. They're not looking at empathy, authoritarianism, attitudes towards migrants. So looking at some different things here, nothing that I'm looking at with you guys, but it's something that you can talk about. There might be something that you could fit in. So if you don't like that hypothesis, then you can go to the next hypothesis: health anxiety and fear of future pandemics. See if you can find stuff about health anxiety and COVID. So you need 5 articles, one for each paragraph that you're writing, and those articles should be related to these hypotheses that we're testing, previous research on these hypotheses. Now, they're not going to be exactly the same, right? Because everybody does something different, but they should be related to this. So that's why I said even the personality characteristics one, that's something you can even talk about because even if they don't directly measure what we're measuring, they're still looking at psychological traits and the COVID behaviors like vaccination or social distancing or mask wearing. And that's what we're interested in looking at. We're not just we're testing empathy, but we're primarily interested in mask wearing, social distancing, and vaccinations. Because those are the 3 components of keeping people safe. And now more people are safe because of the vaccinations, and they feel like they can go out and do different things. But this is what we're looking at because this was the big problem, originally. COVID, people spreading it, going out in groups, going out with lots of people, and doing things they shouldn't be doing, and then not getting vaccinated. And unfortunately, people are dying. I know someone that just died 2 weeks ago because they refused to get the vaccine, and they got sick, and they died, and I got a phone call, and that was it. And they wouldn't listen to anything. They didn't. They were very much against it, and they ended up getting sick and they died. So it can happen. And unfortunately, there's still a lot of resistance. And, if you're going to resist the vaccine, then there's a chance something bad could happen. So that's why this research is important. It's important to understand why certain people think the way they do. And you can respect it, but they have to be aware of the risk. And you want to minimize that kind of thinking. You don't want half the population thinking, I don't want this, I'm not going to do this. The government's telling me to do this. and then only half the country gets vaccinated, and then you have the epidemic goes on and on and on. It never ends because you could never reach herd immunity. So it's very important to understand why people are hesitant, and it's gotten so extreme that they're giving away all kinds of things. They're raffling off money, college tuition. They're raffling off tickets to like baseball games. They're raffling off beer. All these things they're giving away now to just try to increase people's desire to get vaccinated. I mean, they'll do anything to get people vaccinated because they know that the economy and the society cannot properly function until about 70, 75%, maybe 80%, between 70 and 80% of the population is vaccinated, fully vaccinated. So those are our hypotheses, and you should be finding research on those. And each paragraph, so paragraphs 3 to 7, so 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7, those paragraphs should be about 5 different studies that are somewhat related. They don't have to be exactly related to these hypotheses, but somewhat related to these hypotheses, right? And also, could be related to the impact of the COVID and vaccinations in general, or psychological traits with vaccine and mask wearing, vaccine uh, taking, vaccine. People get vaccines, and people that wear masks, social distance, all that stuff. So it's got to be related to that topic. So that's 3 to 7, and then 8. All you're going to do in paragraph 8 is basically state the purpose of the study, which is to look at characteristics that could be related to COVID health behaviors and vaccination, right? And then list these hypotheses. So these hypotheses get listed in paragraph 8. So that's the last paragraph of the introduction. You list these hypotheses. And this literature review, this is going to be part of discussion board 2 also. So you'll have more practice. So you'll be doing this for discussion board 2, and then using what you did in discussion board 2 as part of your introduction section. So you're not duplicating the assignments. You're using discussion board 2. You're doing that with a couple studies, and you're taking that and just transferring them over to your introduction. And that's about it. So it's not, rocket science. It's not something that's, very difficult to figure out. Follow the structure that I give you, and if you follow the instructions, you'll be fine. And when I edit your introductions, I will make comments, and these comments are meant for you to improve on the final copy. They're not meant as punitive. And so this is all, I may make a lot of marks on your paper, because you're going to be submitting through Turnitin. And there'll be a lot of comments, a lot of marks, crossing is out, and all that stuff. That's all just me being the editor. And I'm giving you feedback, and it's not like punitive in any way. So you'll get a rough draft grade, and then obviously you'll get a final grade, on the final paper. And then your paper grade will be half of the rough draft average, and half of it will be the final revised paper. So you need to work on the rough draft. So I do this so that you put some time into the rough draft. So you just don't hand me some, you know, 5 minute thing that you did and then say, here's my rough draft. They did it. Tell me what I need to fix and I'll make the final paper better. Yes, I'm interested in you making the final paper better, but I'm also interested in you making an effort on the rough draft. So spend some time on the rough draft, make the effort, and then get me something that's, halfway decent. It doesn't have to be perfect. It's not going to be perfect. But if it's following this format, you should be fine. I don't think I'm asking for too much here. I think I'm asking for something you can all take care of. But Google Scholar, PsycInfo, Psych articles, these are the ways you want to go about finding the research. And if you have any questions, you can always email me or meet with me, and I'll be happy to talk about it. So that's it for now. Hopefully this is helping you out. And if you have any questions, let me know. If not, I'll be seeing you online